All right, welcome, my guest, to season 2 of The Purpose Tree for a second time, Diana Senechal. Nice to see you again, Diana.
Thank you. It's nice to see you too, Bill, and thank you very much for having me.
Happy New Year. Hope things are going well. Since the last time we spoke about your book, Republic of Noise, and
Yes.
it's one of my favorite nonfiction titles. But I think we may have mentioned in our previous discussion that you had this other book. So this might be a surprise for some people, but you've been a poet for a long time. And the poems have trickled out in different places through the years, being published in some really prominent journals and magazines. And with your debut poetry collection, which I have right here, this is a proof copy. So I don't even have the physical real version yet. It's just the proof. But there it is, Solo Concert. It's a beautiful poetry book. It looks great. It reads great. So we're here today to talk about this collection. So congratulations on the collection.
Thank you, and thank you for everything that you put into it and your idea to bring this about in the first place.
It's my pleasure. It's really, I think the world needs to see work like this. So honored to have you there in the roster and bring this out. Well, let's talk a little bit about the poetry inspiration. Where did this all begin? If we go back to your younger years, at what point did you start writing poetry?
I remember a very distinctive, and I don't know that this was the first, but I remember a special event when I was 8 years old in elementary school, and the author Jane Yolen came to visit the class, and we were in the middle of a bookmaking, book binding project, and we were actually learning how to make hardcover books with beautiful cloth binding, and I was very excited. And while she was visiting, I wrote a poem about finding a cat in the woods, and it was called The Common Denominator. And at one point in the poem, I said that cats are the denominators and the amount is numerators, and cats are the most common denominators in the world. And she really liked that, and she mentioned that in a newspaper article. So that was my first burst into the world of poems and having them read seriously. And then from then on, I think in high school, it began to pick up. I wrote a lot of poetry in high school and then onward. And that it was for, say, in graduate school that I started to, that it became a part of my life that was always there. So
Yeah, well, that's quite young to start. Did you read a lot of poetry?
yes, and one of the most, I had many influences there. I had people who read poetry with me and to me. And so it wasn't only reading poetry, and it was hearing poetry. And I have only dim memories of this, but I've been told that when I was in kindergarten and first grade, the principal would call me into her office, but not because I was in trouble. She wanted to read a poem to me, and then we would talk. And so that was an early influence.
Nice. What a nice experience with that. Yeah, you would think getting called to the principal's office, right? What a pleasant experience.
Yes, that was in Amherst, Massachusetts, and that was a very special school.
Oh, is the school still there?
Yes, the Common School.
Wow, nice history there. That's great. Well, are there poets that inspired you through the years? What are the ones that stand out to this day that
Early on, from my very early memories, I would say Tennyson was an early favorite. And yes, and Blake, and then Robert Frost, yes, Emily Dickinson, yes, but those were some of my favorites. Tennyson, Blake, Shakespeare, I started reading very early. So I had that old language, but then I was also reading poetry in other languages, in Russian and Latin and Greek. And so the sound of the poetry was very important for me. And I could appreciate it, I could absorb something even when I didn't understand exactly what the words meant.
that does that certainly adds to your ability. I know you translate other people's poetry from other languages, and I know you know multiple languages. We talked about that last time, so that has to bring something unique to the whole writing experience, right?
To the writing and to the reading, I think there's something that I don't worry about, that I think many people worry about not being able to understand what they read. And it actually doesn't bother me so much if I don't understand it. There's a certain level of understanding I want to attain. I don't want to be completely lost, completely confused, but I'm comfortable with being a little bit not completely certain about what everything means, and especially in a poem. And I think that helps. Uh, to a great degree, that because a poem can be understood over time, and it can be understood more, better, more clearly, and also in different ways. And so the initial lack of complete understanding is not a problem. It can even help. Because if you think you have it all figured out, well, then maybe you would just put it aside. And if you think you don't, you'll return to it.
Oh, that's such a great point. Yeah. I do feel that way a lot when I read some poetry, like wow, what is this about? And I'm confused and I don't really know. And I think that's okay. Like what you're saying is like just experience it and feel it and go through it and come back to it. I think there's a little bit of mystery there too. That's nice. To lose that is like a terrible.
Yes, I agree that exactly. There's the mystery, and maybe something comes through in the mystery
Yeah,
that you're not realizing. You can't exactly put it into words, you can't pinpoint it, but something is coming through nonetheless.
yeah. That's a great way of looking at it. So, well, this book is in four different parts. Can you talk a little bit about the division of the different parts there, why, and what goes into those different parts of the book?
Well, so the four different parts, each part contains 12 poems, and they more or less, but not directly, not there are exceptions, they more or less work backwards in time, so that the first part is mostly the most recent poems, and then it proceeds back from there. But not always. I mixed it up a little bit when it seemed that a poem fit more in one part than another. But basically, that the overall movement is going back in time. But then each part seems to have its own unity.
I did the opposite once, and I started with the oldest, and it was such a mistake because they were my worst poems. And when you preview a book online, sometimes there's that preview where you just get the first 10 pages, and I'm like, oh, now I'm stuck with these. They're my least skilled poems. They're the oldest, my least favorite. They shouldn't even be published, probably. And here they are. This is what everybody sees first. So I learned a lesson from that experience, really. And my newest, the same thing. I would try to go with the newest. I don't know if you do you go through your work and think about that? I have some fluff, like in music we call them B-sides, or like they're throwaway tracks on every album. So I think of like some of the greatest albums, even some of them have two or three songs that are they're just okay. They're not, maybe they're somebody's favorite, but probably not. Really, really great music and pop music. Maybe every album, maybe those really great albums have it's all 12 songs are just wonderful. For me, I'm like, here's a poetry book, and 40% of you could just throw away. Do you have those kinds of poems that I mean, I feel like this is years of your work though, so, and I don't think there are any throwaways in here personally. So, but do you feel that way about your own work? Do you have
Yeah,
favorites? Like,
absolutely. And I think there's some that maybe aren't. There's some that are definitely throwaways. They're not in this book. They're
yeah.
very bad, and they didn't even make it into a first draft of the manuscript. I just put them aside. There's some that didn't go anywhere at all, and I realized that right away. There are poems that I felt proud of at first, and then later I didn't find that they had that much in them, or they had serious weaknesses that came to light later. So no, but what does in this collection, I think there are some that are slightly, they're in certain ways experimental. So there's a tentative quality about them. For me, they're finished the way I want them, but there's still something about them that is maybe tangential in that sense, and that they're heading in some direction, and I don't know whether I will take that direction further with other poems, but I wanted to try that.
Do you feel like sometimes if you look back on them, even a freshly published book like this that's about to come out, you feel like, oh, there's something else I want to do to it. Like it's not done. Like you could keep going on like that as an author, right?
Well, there was a very interesting thing that happened with that. And so one of the poems, and it's actually one of my favorites in the book, it's Day of Rage. And other people really liked it as well. And some of the people who wrote blurbs for me especially liked that. And I was panicking at the last minute because I saw things that I thought I wanted to change in Day of Rage. And so I sent one of by the people reading the book, I sent the new Day of Rage, and he really didn't like what I had done with it. He said, I think the older one was better. And then we started haggling, and I said, well, what about this? He said, no, but we started just, he was really trying to push me back to what I had before. And so sometimes, and then it sort of kind of magically reverted to that version, just to the older one. And I think that he was right. It was better. Sometimes it's very important to separate genuine self-criticism from a kind of flurry of self-doubt just before publication, because you can start thinking, oh, I should have done this and this, and maybe not. Maybe none of that is true, and it should be the way it should stay the way it is. But that cooler eye is very important. And the people differ. You know, there are people who write their poems and they come out just about exactly the way they want the first time. And that happens with me sometimes, and both ways. And then there are other people who revise and revise and revise until they get it the way they want. And sometimes I'm like that as well. And so for me, it can really go either way. And so I have to be very discerning. The trick is to be discerning about what really needs changing and what doesn't.
Yeah, the self-doubt that comes in can really sabotage a lot of writers. And but I like how you do both. You have that spontaneous here it is, the poem's ready, and but then you also have those that are in there that maybe you spent a lot more time laboring over. So
Yeah,
just
and some
depends on
that
the poem maybe, right?
some changed over time. Some
Yeah.
went through quite a few changes, but maybe over several years or longer.
When you write a poem, at what point do you select the form that it's going to be in, the type of poem? I know that you have that one of the great things about solo concert is that you have a lot of variety of form in here. Do you pick that, you sit down and say, I want to write a sonnet, or does that happen as you're getting your thoughts down on the page and you figure it all out?
Again, both can happen, and I really enjoy form. And one of the reasons I enjoy different forms so much, is that surprisingly they bring surprise, and you know exactly what I mean. So you sit down and write a sonnet, and I can even think I'm going to write a sonnet now, but what comes out of it is going to be surprising, because the form pushes a surprise, right? Unless you write stupid AI style sonnets that are, they don't go anywhere. The rhymes are predictable, the ideas are very canned and pat. If you don't write it like that, if you're looking for not just words that rhyme, but words that connect in interesting ways, well, then those connections are going to be, they're not going to be what you expected at first. You'll see something that really maybe startles you, and I love that. So sometimes I sit down and I say, this is going to be a sonnet, I know, or I hear it in a certain meter, or I know that it's going to be in triads and in triplets, and the or whatever the case may be, or it's free verse. Free verse also has its challenges, or I picture the way it looks on the page, and that all of that can happen. Or sometimes I just have something to begin with the first line or a phrase or something, and I just run with that and see where that goes.
Do you have a most personal poem in here?
Ooh, that's a tough question. There's some that I would consider very, very personal, but they won't necessarily come across that way because they're veiled enough that they that nobody would know exactly what they were about. They're not confessional in the overt sense, but I would say that a number of them are personal. It would be hard to say which was the most personal. But something, for instance, later in the book, just as one example, as I was looking through The Corridor King, I remember very clearly the occasion that gave rise to that poem, and it's very odd. And another aspect of personal poems is that, and this, I think this is true for many people who write poetry, is that the actual occasion may seem insignificant, right? And then the poem, in the poem, it becomes something else. So you can't really say this is about this. You know, the Corridor King was so-called about a hallway conversation I had with a colleague about a student, but it isn't about that. It's about so many other things. It departs from the actual event that occasioned it. So that's the difficulty in calling something a personal poem or not, and that a lot of them are, but they go in a direction that departs from whatever the personal event was.
Do you have a poem in here that's really far away from you as a person? Is there one that's just really external? Maybe it's still your thoughts on something. Maybe it's a historical analysis or something that just really takes us far away from you and your personal life.
Yes, well, I think if there are a few, and one is very far toward the end, and um, this is Embarking from Libau, and it's about the Russo-Japanese War in 1905, and I'd read for a Russian history course a memoir, a first-person memoir of someone who rode the ship that was going all the way around Africa, I believe, to trying to reach Japan to defeat the Japanese. And the details are fuzzy for me, but it was a disastrous trip. You know, and the people on board were completely unprepared for what they would encounter along the way, and they got carried away in Africa. They had baboons on their ship, and all kinds of things happened. Some people went crazy. They got sick, and the level of disaster was so profound. And I was fascinated by that, but it also speaks to many situations that we encounter today in personal lives and in the world at large, when people just walk into something that they're utterly unprepared for, and they think they're stronger, more powerful than they are. They think they know more than they do, and and then they're in for a rude surprise.
So some of your poems are based on things you've read.
Yes, some are based
And
on things I've read. The poem Cigarettes, this one goes through several changes. This is near the beginning, and it starts out rather personal and autobiographical because I used to be quite a smoker. And so it's talking about the appeal of smoking and the bonding, the truth that I found in smoking. And it did feel like a kind of truth. And then and talking about in the next stanza about how nagging, when people nagged me, it only made me want to smoke more because all those those shoulds made me rebellious. You know, I shouldn't do this, I should do that. And then I ask myself, but don't I have shoulds of my own? And then I say, yes, of course I do, but any should requires a counterpoint. And so the poem is slowly moving into form. It starts out more or less free verse, and then it goes into blank verse, and then the last stanza and two lines become a sonnet. And in that last stanza and two line, that sonnet part, I tell a story which is about somebody else, and this is a rather a reworked version of a biography that I read. And
Wow.
so yeah, so it moved from very autobiographical into a story that's really about somebody else, but changed enough that perhaps some people in Hungary would know who this
Yeah.
is. But they're teaching robotics at the public school will throw them off, but he did teach. He taught art at the public school. And this is actually, well, I'll tell you, it's not a big secret. So the this last part of the poem is about the singer Tomasz Cha, who I'm writing a book about right now. And he went through a period in his life where he was teaching art in a tiny little village where he was very lonely and isolated. And he would come home and play guitar by himself in the evenings after teaching. And then of course, later on, he becomes a legendary uh, singer and songwriter, along with Guy Zamperamigny, who wrote the lyrics. And so, this period of his life was a time when he couldn't foresee what was going to happen later.
Oh. Well, as a former smoker, I related to cigarettes. I felt that.
There's some truth there, right?
Yes, yes. Only people who have gone through that know. Well, what about the title poem also, solo concert? What could you say about that? What is a solo concert and why did you pick this as the
Yes, and there's a lot to say about that. So solo concert, everyone talks about solo concerts, but what drew me to the title was the paradox or the contradiction involved because concert also has that meaning of togetherness,
Yes, yes.
being in concert, being
Yeah.
together, connected with others. And that's part of the meaning of a concert performance as well. It's musicians coming together with other musicians or with the audience. There's that togetherness that happens. So if you're in a solo concert, you're alone and together at the same time. And there have been books called Alone Together, such as Sherry Turkle's book and so forth. So this is a different look, a different way of looking at that alone together paradox. And it was actually inspired, and again, inspired but not about a particular solo concert that I attended last year. Then I thought this would be a great title for the whole because the poems do all in some way and often quite remotely have to do with music, but music is what brings them together. And they also have that combination of solitude and togetherness throughout, solitude and relationship.
You had the solo concert poem written first, though, before you decided, let me title this.
Exactly, yes.
Later on, there are a couple of poems at the very end I wanted to ask you about. I guess the autobiographical aspects. Reunion, was that about a real reunion?
A reunion of sorts. Yes, yes. It was an occasion where many people, yes, of not a college, not a school reunion, but it was an occasion that brought together a lot of people who knew each other but maybe hadn't seen each other for a while.
That could definitely evoke a lot of feelings and
And it wasn't a family reunion either.
oh yeah, okay,
Yeah.
good. Yeah, a lot of different types of reunions, so it's
Yes. Yeah.
and how about leave of absence? Upon returning from a leave of absence is the final poem. Is that about a real leave of absence?
Indeed, yes, it is, and it's not. I mean, because uh, I had left my undergraduate studies at Yale for 3.5 years. And I actually withdrew for the 3.5 years simply because I couldn't take more time off. But I stayed there and I worked at the library during that time. So I was very close to the university and I was taking courses. And then I reapplied for admission as a financially independent student, which worked amazingly. And then the rest went splendidly. And it was just a completely different chapter of my undergraduate education. I was very focused. I had learned a lot from the time off and so forth. And so I think that the poem had a lot to do with that, a lot to do with that sense that when you really uh, when you learn to save something that you're used to wasting. You learn to become more frugal, and not with money, although I was probably becoming a little bit more frugal with money too, but uh, with yourself. You learn how to conserve your resources more and how to direct your resources more. That's that's an enormous, that's a change that affects how you see the world in turn.
Yeah,
So becoming more frugal in that sense, also in the poem, it has the effect of shrinking your sorrows, uh, putting them in a different perspective. You see something so much bigger than that massive thing that you were going through before. Now seems so small when you become more, uh, I guess, when you've come to treasure your resources more.
is that the oldest? Upon returning, is that the oldest poem in
Yeah,
here?
that probably that, yes, I think that was the oldest, and I remember writing that in John Hollander's undergraduate advanced verse writing seminar, and he really liked that one. And I was actually surprised. I thought there were other poems that I liked better, but he especially liked that one. But what he liked about it was the way it works with syllabic verse, because I had learned syllabic verse from him in his class, and we read Marianne Moore, who uh, opened my eyes to a different way of writing poetry. And so this was a reflection of that in some ways. So what he loved to talk about with regard to syllabic verse was how you can it all syllabic verse has regular syllable counts, and you can set up your stanzas so that they have 7 syllables, 5, 10, and then you repeat the pattern, but you can move in and out of metrical patterns while you're doing that. There could be, in a given stanza, there could be no discernible metrical pattern, and then it could move into something that's much more audible, that sounds more like accentual verse. And so, and you have that flexibility. And so we looked, for instance, at Marianne Moore's poem, What Are Years? And it moves into an emphatic meter and rhythm at the end of the poem.
You're a serious poet. I guess I just wonder, why did it take so long for a debut collection? I guess as you were publishing other books, did you ever think like I want to do something with the poem someday? Was that a goal
Okay.
somewhere?
Oh, it was a goal for a long time. And it's hard, it's very hard. It takes a long time to figure out where to send your poems. But you send them out, you wait and you
Yeah,
wait and you
a lot of
wait,
waiting.
and then they say, oh, we're sorry, we're not going to take them. And you try, and I tried at first, I tried not to submit simultaneously to different places, but then I realized the wait would be so long, only to find out that they weren't taking it. And then, oh, and then I
Yeah.
would just say, forget it. I'll focus on the writing and not sending them out, because it takes so much time. It can be very distracting. And you also have to know, you really have to be deliberate about where you send them. You can't send them randomly. You're just wasting your own and other people's time. You have to do research into each journal. It is very important to read the journal, because it may be a great journal, but their editor's idea of poetry may be quite different from yours. And it might be excellent, but it might not be what you write. And so uh, or they might be regional, they might focus on poets who are from somewhere where you're not, and so forth. So there's so many reasons why it's important to do your research, and that all takes lots and lots of time. So I was trying here and there, sending things and getting some things published and a lot sent back, and I was writing, and so all of that was going on. But I think for everybody, there has to be some point where it starts to catch, right? And the, it's very hard to explain what that is, but you know when it's starting to have traction of a certain kind.
Pick up
And
a
I feel that
momentum.
happening now, but that wasn't always the case.
Well, and I remember the long wait and the postage issue of putting these all in envelopes back in the day. It's
Yes.
still a long wait, even doing it these days digitally. It's still at least a little bit more. Many more journals are open to simultaneous submissions, but
Which
unlike
doesn't necessarily help things,
no, it
because
doesn't. It's
no,
more
it just
confusing.
means that people are sending so much stuff out and they're deluged, and there are journals who simply don't get around to reading yours. They have plenty lined up that they already want to publish, and then they'll look at a few from the slush pile, but not very many. And that you think in your mind, you're just waiting for them to sit down with your poems and give them a slow, nice read, and that might not be happening at all. It might not.
Yeah.
They're giving it, they have an intern who's looking quickly through the poems and forwarding the ones that seem promising, and sometimes even with submittable, sometimes they just get lost and you never hear anything.
They do, yes. And I personally, I try to get through, but like, yeah, and you wonder, oh, did the interns miss something? And then, so
Yeah.
what's their style like compared to yours? And so you have to worry. And I've talked to other editors about that too. They've worried so much about, oh no, maybe some of the best pieces got passed on, and just because there's a different style, and even things that have been passed along to me that were, oh, we think we're a yes on this, and then they didn't read to the last story where there's something completely outrageous that disqualifies that writer. So
Yes.
there's so much that goes into it. But yeah, I mean, the presses have gotten hundreds of, so I see from the other side of that now too. It's just hundreds and hundreds, and it's really it's a game that writers have to play, and you have to try to catch their attention, and it's just, who has the energy and time for that, and the money, and a lot of them, their submission fees now, and so
It's hard, and it's hard on the editors too, and the editors are often doing this as volunteers in
yeah.
on top of full-time jobs, and then there's turnover, and maybe there was one editor when you submitted it, and now there's a different editor who's catching
Yeah.
up with everything that's going on, and so all those things happening. So but I think beneath that, there's the question of when you know. So for many years, people would ask me, "Are you a poet?" And I didn't want to sound pretentious, and I would say, "Well, I write poetry." That would be my answer. I write
Yeah,
poetry.
that's
That's
a good answer.
reasonable. That's reasonable. But then there came a point more recently when I realized, well, I have been doing this seriously for long enough, and I know enough of what I'm doing that I can legitimately call myself a poet. And that also means, but that also carries a responsibility, because of that, this also means that it's really on me to determine if a poem is good or not. It's not sending it to the editors comes after I've already decided that it's good. It's not that I send things out and let's see if they think it's good.
Let's see.
No, let's make sure it's good and then send it out. And so I think that that's a shift in the way I'm thinking about it.
How do you know when you write a poem that's good?
Uh, that there's the element of surprise, but not a fake surprise, a genuine surprise that surprises even me and works. That will be a telltale sign. Also, when there's a lack of anything, so it has to be very spare in a sense. There has to be sparse. There can't be, you were talking about fluff. There can't be fluffy words. There can't be extraneous things that really aren't necessary. It has to be necessary.
Every word, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, some can be looser, and sometimes some are very, very sparse and taut, and then some are just a little bit have more wiggle room, and maybe not every single word is necessary, but it's a different kind of poem. But even there has to be a sense of inevitability that it's supposed to be that way.
When I discovered your nonfiction book and never thought you were a poet, and never didn't know that about you going into that when I met you and started corresponding with you, had no idea that yeah, this is a whole other side to you. It's quite a different thing as you compare the poetry writing to the nonfiction projects that you've worked on, right? Where's the contrast there? I mean, it's like really different worlds, right?
They are and aren't. So there's literary nonfiction or creative nonfiction, and I really did spill into that in Republic of Noise. So there are several chapters that have passages that are really more along the lines of literary nonfiction, and that actually confused some readers and reviewers and critics. And there was one who gave me a very harsh review for not just sticking to my educational critique, being very straight up about my points. And he thought that that's what the book was supposed to be, and I should have just stayed with that instead of lapsing off into these lyrical digressions. But I don't regret the lyrical digressions at all. I think they were supposed to, that was part of what the book was about. And part of the reason why I went with the publisher, who, and I've been with him twice, Roman and Littlefield, is that they basically left me alone. They liked the book, they were going to publish it, and they let me do what I wanted with it. And I wanted that, and I wanted the book to be all these things at once. But that wasn't necessarily accepted, and to some readers that can be confusing. They want to know, well, what is this? Is this, is this an education book? Is this cultural criticism? Is this lyrical nonfiction? Is this autobiographical? Is this about literature? Why is it all of these things at once?
It could be all, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was important for it to be all of those things.
Well, this book is coming out January 2025. It will have already been out by the time people hear this.
Yeah.
Uh, what is next for you? Are you continuing to think about poems and creative work, translations?
All of it. So I have some new poems that are written and some new translations that I've just sent out. A very interesting poet I have begun translating here. Her name is Gyöngyű Hegedűs, and her poetry is of the kind, it's fascinating and very moving. It's the kind that really cracks language open. It pushes or stretches language to its limits, where words are broken apart, and yet the is broken apart across line boundaries. So a word without a hyphen, and it has, and yet the two parts of the words have two different meanings, and so you see the meanings exploding within all these the fragments. And sometimes fragments or ellipses or lacunae are expressed by empty parentheses, and all kinds of interesting things going on that then mean that the syntax can be interpreted in all kinds of ways, and things turn into their opposites and so forth. And for it is very exciting to translate these poems, and I'm looking forward to the continuation. So there's that and various other translations as well. And then I'm working on the book about Tomáš Cseh and Géza Bereményi, who wrote hundreds of songs together and created stage productions for Cseh himself. He would usually perform solo on stage, inhabiting all sorts of characters of their songs. Their songs were filled with characters, and then Géza Bereményi would write also text that would connect the songs into stories and into larger stories with an arc and so forth. And so their work is so interesting and has so many different tones and aspects and moods, and the audiences would find the songs funny. This within a given concert, a given performance, there would be people laughing and there would be people genuinely crying over the same song. And and that's always there, that you can that you can respond to these in so many different ways, and yet they're very down to earth at the same time. They're cryptic, and yet they're about everyday life. There's a sort of a humility to them, a bareness to them that makes them all the more interesting.
Wow, fascinating. Would you like to share a couple of poems from the book?
Yes, if you have any that you would like me to read, that would be fine. Otherwise, I'll pick one or two.
You can go ahead. You go and pick.
Okay, so let's see. I think I will actually pick listening as the first one, and then I'll pick another one for farther in the book. Okay, so this one is listening. Today I tried something new or old in a new way, saying nothing. True, many stints of null had marked my days before, but this nothing had a pluck to it. Tuning, muting its strings, gearing up for the miracle, as anything that comes from zero is miracle. It befriended the oval. Later, I thought of how the hush had given me time to hear space sing, to see the clouds converge, break up, glitter, and spatter the long sands, daring me into a brief collapse of words. The words resurged, but with the glint of return from a long voyage. Later, I looked up the name of that beach whose waves rough sang the sky. And that one, that last the last stanza is in quotes, but I'm actually not quoting anyone in particular. That is made up. But to me, it sounded a little bit like Walt Whitman. It sounded like it could have come from a Whitman poem. So later I looked up the name of that beach whose waves rough sang the sky. It had a little bit of the sound of Out of the Cradle endlessly rocking to me. That was,
Nice. Yes, very much.
and then
Excellent.
so for another one, I think I'll go. This is a favorite, the Jackrabbit poem. So I think I'll read that. And this is an old one. This goes back to my days in San Francisco. So back into the 90s. Jackrabbit. This land has never been painted properly. Mix clumps of juniper with moonbeam blue. Throw in a bit of tooth, a bit of song, to fill the silhouette with bite and tongue. This is a real dirt road with imagined rocks, senses, insensate dangers, destinations. Headlights sweeping the long floor of the mind pan a jackrabbit back and forth in time. Caught in the blank emergency of beams, he dodges his dilemma with a brisk what if, that dances him to death. He could not find a way out of the way. Earlier that day, I was on the phone, missing all your relevant advice. A wire had got caught up in my throat, an answer dodger. It distracted me. It trembled so fast that it numbed my tongue. It did this while you were trying to talk. I couldn't listen well because the dance had blurred all trace of consonant and sense. I think now that this may have been a crash of my old givens against your offerings, new junipers or ways of seeing them, new countries or ways of getting there. When I hung up, there was no wire or word. The moon was gone, the road a long fur coat on some unwitting wearer, blissed and hushed. I forgot all about it until years later. You had said, you can go left or right. Take me straight, I shouted, straight to the remedy. Gallop like the 19th century down to the police station or cemetery. striding answerless, a station incarnate. A cop ticketed me for not listening. Now I can bear the rabbits and the wires. I inch through forks and roadkill, listening.
That's
Funny, I
terrific.
didn't mean it that way, but both have to do with listening very
They do. I
directly.
know. I just realized that. I was going to ask you.
That was unintentional.
Not intentional. No.
Not,
Well, and that goes back to, a lot of the concern from your nonfiction book that we mentioned here and we talked about last time is just being able to listen and the noise that's out there. So wow, that's great. Thank you for sharing those. And I know you have some readings coming up and events, and we really look forward to seeing a lot more of you and hearing more of these poems.
thank you.
We're going to put a link below and make sure people can click on and buy this from different vendors. And we look forward to seeing future poems too, future work from you. Thank you for taking the time today. Diana Senechal, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.